I just don't know how you tell the community we close your kid's school and we're building a new facility for ourselves. I don't know how you have that conversation.
Well, I answered that question last night, and I said just that. That's what the community's going to be saying. You didn't have enough money to operate 3 schools, so you closed, and now you're building yourself a building. And the answer is there will be, the concept right now to go forward is that there will be no impact on the operational ongoing revenue for the school. And over the life cycle of the move to North Carroll, as comparing it to North Carroll High School, it would be less expensive and more efficient on our operating budget. I think this is a better solution than moving us to North Carroll.
I'm not sure I understand that, and not that you need to defend it today, but I'm just not sure I understand what the 20-minute differential to North Carroll, why that creates such an operational challenge.
Well, let me pull back from that and say, I again would invite you, as we've done before, to sit down with our Board of Education, because they would very much want to be involved in this conversation, and let's talk about it. Let's meet as joint boards, talk about this move. We've not been able to do that, and I would invite you again to let's talk in detail about this concept. Let's talk about our concerns over the move to North Carroll, and have a conversation board to board.
Well, we wanted to do that, but the president of your board was talking about litigation, and we immediately decided that if we're going to end up in litigation, that wasn't really a great place for us to be.
Well, I think that
public conversation. So I think she kind of took that off the table, honestly.
I think the letter said they wanted to avoid litigation, as opposed to go.
It was a veiled threat, but a threat. So
well, I think that with this option and your letter, I think that, and I can't speak for the board, but my impression is that's certainly off the table, because your letter really said this $4 million follows wherever you want to go, follows the project, so that opened up other avenues for discussion.
I don't know that we're here to debate this today. I mean, we're going to get into some areas here that certainly other folks should be involved in.
Correct.
And while I appreciate the fact that you used a quote that I've used many, many times about out of the box, I also have been using a quote that I in no way am in favor of building new buildings when we have empty ones.
Even if it's more cost effective.
So and I got to tell you,
for who?
Personally, for me,
for everyone.
Personally, for me, I'd be hard pressed, and to right now say that it would be more cost effective to build a new building than to be put into a facility that is more than reasonable with the correct refurbishing in order to make it work. I'd love to see that. If you're going to do a feasibility study, let's do that one.
Well, I think that's what we will include. I think if you include...
What's the difference between building a new building and moving over to an existing building that's quite frankly set up really, really well? And I also have a real problem with not understanding why a 15-minute ride with better infrastructure than what you currently have is such a detriment. I continue, and I got to be honest, Steve. And you know me very well, and you know that I know a lot of people that have been through the system and everything else. And the feedback that I hear is there are a lot of folks that are questioning that. They just can't understand why this 15 minutes is such a huge deal.
I'd be happy to sit down with the board and explain that. I think we can show that. I will say, just with all due respect, the information that we're getting seems to change. And I mentioned that because you said, accommodating us at the building. We during your budget discussions, you talked about that, outfitting former North Carroll High School to meet the needs of our operations. We talked about that very, very, very much. But then we heard, and through budget discussions and Commissioner Weaver's discussion with the town of Hampstead, and also from an email from Scott Mosier, that has now changed to minimal modifications to the building. We heard that was going to be a permanent home for us, and now we're hearing, again, not directly, but through your conversations and conversations with others, that the move is temporary. And we heard 10 years, 15 years. Last night we heard 25 years. So I think we're all struggling to find out what are the conditions of the move. Is it a permanent move? Is it going to be modifications that would satisfy our operations, or is it going to be minimal modifications? All of this is evolving, and I don't have any real clear sense of what the accommodations would be at North Carroll High School, because we've not had that conversation. So I would suggest we need to have that conversation.
We need that conversation, but we had our facilities people try to start working on this to clarify some of this, and they've been told not yet.
We don't know what minimal means. We don't know what temporary means.
Well, I don't think it was ever intended to be temporary, unless we needed a school.
Full-time, that was a term I used, if it was a time, you've been in temporary facilities for,
I think the only,
18 years
I
now.
was going to say, I think the only reference to that was if at some point the population dictated that that was a school that we ought to bring back online, it had the ability for that to be done, but
The bottom line, it's a 50-acre campus, that you're not going to find that kind of ground in that area in the future, anytime in the future, with a huge building on it that we're not going to get rid of. Sometimes, if it ever comes to the point it comes back online, here's the site, it's available. So, if I use the term temporary, that could be whatever. It could be forever. It may never come back online, or it could be 25 years. It's not going to happen in the near future. We know that. And even with the Winchester building, that has been 17 years of temporary involvement there. And prior to that was the courthouse, I believe, here for whatever number of years. So it's never really been a permanent site anywhere, but it's all county buildings that are basically given to you to use. We pay in-kind payment on it. So, it's cost reduction to the board to use county facilities. If you look in the past history, it's always been a pretty good win-win for both parties, I believe.
Well, and again, I think this would be a win-win too, and to Commissioner Wance's point, I think when you look at, and I will also say what Commissioner Rothschild has said in the discussions is North Carroll High School is a facility, but it's 40 years old. It needs a new roof. Its mechanical systems are close to end of life. It will need a renovation. It will be an expensive renovation. If you look at the life cycle costs over the next 15 years, what I want to find out is which is the least expensive option. And certainly I think we should be getting that information as we look at temporary as opposed to permanent. So let's compare the two. Let's go through this process together as joint boards and see which is the best option, both on the operating and the capital side. I don't understand why there would be any objection to that before we make any.
because we own that building either way.
Pardon me?
We own that building either way. So,
Well, you made the decision to hang on to the building. You have valid decisions to do that.
Right.
But that's not a decision the board
we
made.
have certain facilities we need to provide space for, and we have certain buildings we own.
So whether you're in the building or not, in North Carroll, I'm talking
We got the
about,
building.
we've got to worry about the roof and the HVAC and everything else. No matter if you're using a building or not, that's still expenses that we're going to incur. So that's kind of out of the equation because it has to be taken care of anyway.
Well-
And my understanding, and with the board here, is that the $4 million to move you to that building, we want to set you up so that you can function very efficiently. I have no intention of just, if it worked out that way, sticking you out there and say, okay, this is it, deal with it. You have to be able to function efficiently out there. You have to. So, in my opinion, the $4 million put you out there, get you started. Another year down the road, you say, okay, we're here, we're looking at this, we need additional funds for this and this. Okay. If that's what it takes to run efficiently, that's what it takes. That's my understanding of the way it's going to working out there. But as far as the roof, the HVAC, the 40-year-old building, we have it anyway. And yes, we decided to keep it because it's a 50-acre campus, and like Commissioner Weaver said, where else are we going to find that? Well, I just don't want to give that away to someone else. And the only way it would be temporary, in my opinion, would be if, as Commissioner Howard said, we need a high school out there, and I don't see that happening anytime in the near future. I mean, it could be another 18 years. You've been in Winchester for 18 years. It could be 18 years for it. That decision was made.
We allocated money the last 3 years to the Board of Ed to try to get teacher salaries. We've been trying to get, improve performance in schools, and all those items have been high on our agenda to try to get Carroll County back up with all other counties, and even with our efforts, we're still falling behind because the other counties went up also. So, I look at this money that we put forth, but I'm very reluctant to put any other monies into it if it takes away from anything that we could have been improving those areas with that money rather than just building something new when we have excess buildings out here. And I go along with Commissioner Lance on his thought on this, that, new buildings are out of the question for us right now, even though I know you're doing this on your own, but it's still taxpayer dollars paying for it.
Well, it's all taxpayer dollars.
It's all taxpayer dollars.
So here's my position. I've been pretty quiet, and I'm actually not going to lobby one way or the other. Well, see, you can talk a lot, Dennis, because you don't say anything, but when I say something, it matters. It means something. Here's my position with respect to this, Steve. We were all faced with a joint problem, and we had too much space, too many buildings and too much space. So whatever we decide to do jointly, here's my position. If we're going to build something else new, then we have to either A, sell something else, so we don't increase our real estate holdings further, because that's exactly the opposite of what we want to do, or B, take something you already hold and put it under a long-term lease to a third party. But we certainly can't build new buildings and continue to hold unoccupied space in the county inventory, because that would be counterproductive to the reason we did this in the first place, which is getting rid of excess infrastructure. That's my position. So that doesn't foreclose on any options, but it just means we can't have our cake and eat it too. It's got to be one way or the other.
I guess my confusion would be the intent of the July 27th letter. The letter.
Tell your board to get ready to move to North Carolina High School.
No, the letter was, if you have other, but you.
Well, because the board was out there talking about, that it was something that wasn't going to work, and our feeling was, if there's something else out there we're not thinking of, we'll be happy to think about it. But I don't think any of us envision building a new building when we've got stuff we're trying to get out of. And Commissioner Rothschild, I know what you're saying, but that's different than what you said this morning. This morning you said we're going to give you wanted to give a very concrete answer that didn't leave ambiguity. And who the heck are we selling that school to?
Well, there is no ambiguity from our perspective. It's on our side of the street. The bottom line is this: if the continued position of this board, and I'm not judging it, is we're not going to sell and we're not going to lease North Carroll. They were absolutely, we can't build any new buildings, and the Board of Education has to go there. But if the board chose, and I'm not suggesting you do, but if you all chose to either sell or put North Carroll under a long-term lease, then in those conditions, I personally would be open to a discussion about whether we build something. So we can't keep North Carroll and build another building. It's got to be one or the other.
Well, I would say,
assuming the board is not going to sell or lease North Carroll, then the answer is no. That's my.
Well, there seems to be some confusion. Obviously, I read the letter different than your intent. The letter said if you have other viable options, please explore them. We can't force you to move to North Carroll. We took that initiative and created a viable option, which now is being rejected. And I guess I'm confused about that. And I would say the only way to resolve any confusion is, again, I would say let's meet and discuss the pros and cons of these options before we make any decisions. We have not had the opportunity to do that. And so, again, I would invite you on behalf of the Board of Education, let's sit down with two boards and discuss this.
I guess that statement comes down to what your definition of viable is. Because as I've said, this is completely out of the blue for me. The intent was, and I love it when people take letters and it's like statistics. You can make them say whatever you want. And, I love it when people take letters and try to insert things and get different meanings out of them. But it has never been my intent, and I think I've been quite clear in the 3 years that I've been here. When you talk about viable options, and I was put in this seat to protect the taxpayers. That's my number one priority here. And this in no way does that at all. This is ridiculous. I got to tell you. Building new buildings when there's perfectly good empty buildings that could be enhanced to meet the needs just doesn't make any sense to me. And in the 12 hours that this viable alternative has been put out there, I haven't gotten one person that has agreed with that viable option. I have heard a ton of people say, "What?" So that's you have to understand our initial reaction here too. This is something that we have never even considered would be brought up for me. So, and if we wanted to do that, then we should just be throwing.
We could build the new state's attorney's building.
So let
Well,
me
we
ask
could
this-
build. Yeah, we
this
could
is-
build a
let
new
me-
public
let me-
safety building or whatever we want to do.
let me
Why,
ask-
why do this?
But maybe, I mean, the one conversation I'm certainly willing to have is what is the negative effect of the move?
I would love to hear what the negative effect
But-
is. I can't.
But and that's, if that's a conversation I have with the board, that's.
Yeah, and that's fine.
fine.
I'd be willing to do that too, because I'd love to hear
But
why
I mean-
15 or 20 minutes with better infrastructure is such a huge problem. I'd love to hear the answers to
Well,
that.
let's meet and we'll provide that information to you.
So that's fine with me if you want to do it that way.
So let me ask the Board of Commissioners a question. There's another option
But
here.
for me, deciding whether or not new versus moving, no. I've already made that decision.
I have a
So-
hypothetical question that does apply here. It does apply, we haven't addressed it. If hypothetically, and there's nobody said they're going to do this, nobody's voted to do it, nobody's talking about doing, but if hypothetically, the Board of Education determined on their own that it was necessary to close another school, hypothetically, if it were centrally located, and the Board of Education wanted to move into that building, a vacant school building centrally located, would we support that? I'm just asking. I'm just asking.
I would say, and again, I want to pull back, because Commissioner Lance and I have gone a little bit too far than I wanted to go, is the board has not agreed to anything. All they did was say, let's
You're going
look
to
at
take
this.
taxpayer money and put it towards a study, Steve? You've already done it. You've
They-
already
they-
made a decision.
They've made a decision to look at the viability of this option.
Well, I would suggest that, not to, interrupt their decision, but if they really want to have a discussion, we ought to have it before you write a check for $50,000.
What did you say, Doug?
I said, if we really want to have a discussion, we ought to have it before you write a check for $50,000.
But wouldn't we need to know the costs associated to have an intelligent discussion about it?
I thought our staff had already provided a lot of those numbers.
Well, we know it's not going to be nothing, so, I mean, I think the question is whether there's even a willingness to, and what some of the repercussions of the move are, if that's what the discussion's about. I mean, man, that firm has done some nice work. They're not going to come back with an inexpensive option. It's just not the way they roll. I mean,
No, and to that end, Doug, they took a public safety, they took a concrete bunker and made it into something that we didn't even imagine.
right.
Well, and we're
Which is
talking
what I
about,
was anticipating with North Carroll. They took an existing and.
But I'd also encourage, if we're going to do that, we ought to get a bus or something like that. We ought to truck down to Anne Arundel County's school system. I don't know if you've been down there in their building.
many times.
Well, I mean, they got a big, long building with cubicles in it.
Right.
And there's, I mean, it's just a rectangle. And so there aren't, but when we went through the needs assessment of who needed what, we ended up with a very different list. So the fact is, the question is, what do we need to do our jobs, or what do we need? Those are two different, what we'd like to have. I mean, the fact is, if you got a phone, a desk, and a computer, you can probably do 80% of what you need to do, no matter what job you have in government. And if you got a conference room where you can meet privately with folks, you probably get 90%.
All good reasons to sit down and meet. All of these questions are viable questions and good questions that we would need to hash out, and we can't do it in separate camps.
I think if one thing you take away from this, it's going to be about the dollars and cents, and we're not going to put taxpayers' dollars into a new facility for people here. Our intention has been to get the teachers, get the students the best education they can, get the teachers up to where they need to be. And I think we've been adamant about that in the last 3 years. This is kind of counter to that at this time, and I think that's what bothers a lot of the board here. We're not putting, the money's going the opposite of where we need it.
And you really can't speak for your board, but there is some concern about the fact that, the fund balance could go from $5 million worth of computers, and someone thinks a good use of it is new office space. I have concerns about the board and the way they're thinking. I mean, where the support folks are. I mean, I don't think, we have these discussions even amongst ourselves, we don't spend money on space or our offices or, and we're stuff bulging at the seams. So if they get $1 million, and then next year in the budget, we're going to talk about technology money or other stuff that it's like, I don't know, it's concerning, so. But, I mean, I don't, do we want to try to set up something to have,
We'll meet and talk with them. I mean,
I can't see how it would hurt to have two boards sit down and talk, but it has to be done quickly, so we can get this conversation done.
I think that's the best way to hash it out. I mean, we certainly have a common goal, and why don't we sit down and look at it together?
Could we get this on the agenda in the next?
probably early September.
It'd have to be September at this point.
And time's ticking on this. We're out of,
The board has a work session on August 23rd. I don't know, maybe if we're already together that date, maybe if that date doesn't work for you.
Yeah, that won't work. We
All
can-
right, well, early September, I think that's a positive step forward.
it has to be at that time, but, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go through